One Iranian Rial equals $0. Not almost zero. Not a fraction of a cent. Google it right now, and the converter rounds it to zero. That's not a glitch. That's the end result of decades of economic policy, international sanctions, and a currency that has been in freefall for so long that the world's financial systems have essentially given up on tracking its value in meaningful terms. This is the story of how the Iranian Rial became the least valuable currency on earth. To understand how Iran got here, you have to go back to a time when the Rial was actually worth something. Before 1979, Iran was one of the wealthiest nations in the Middle East. Oil money was flowing, the Shah was modernizing the country, and the exchange rate sat at roughly 70 rials to $1. 70. That's it. If you had a $100 bill, you'd get about 7,000 rials. Today, that same $100 would get you over 100 million rials on the black market. The first domino fell in 1979. The Islamic Revolution overthrew the Shah and installed a theocratic government under Ayatollah Khomeini. Almost overnight, an estimated $30 to $40 billion in capital fled the country. Wealthy Iranians, foreign investors, and businesses pulled their money out as fast as they could. The Rial didn't just dip, it cratered. Then came the hostage crisis. Iranian students seized the American embassy in Tehran and held 52 American diplomats hostage for 444 days. The United States responded with the first wave of economic sanctions: frozen assets, trade restrictions, financial isolation. These sanctions weren't temporary. They became a permanent feature of Iran's relationship with the West, and they've been tightening ever since. By 1999, it took over 9,000 rials to buy a single dollar. That's a collapse of more than 99% from the pre-revolution rate. But the story was just getting started. Here's something most people don't realize about Iran's economy. Oil accounts for roughly 60% of the government's revenue. When oil prices are high and exports are flowing, Iran can manage. When sanctions choke off those exports, the government runs massive deficits. And how does it cover those deficits? It prints money, more rials chasing fewer goods. That's the textbook definition of inflation. And Iran has been running this playbook for decades. The result is a self-reinforcing spiral. The government prints money, prices rise, people lose faith in the real. They rush to convert their savings into dollars, euros, or gold. That flood of selling crashes the real further. Prices rise even more, and the cycle repeats. In 2015, there was a brief moment of hope. Iran signed the JCPOA, the nuclear deal with the United States, the European Union, and several world powers. In exchange for limiting its nuclear program, Iran would get relief from some of the most crippling sanctions. The Rial stabilized. Foreign investment started trickling in. For a few years, it looked like Iran might turn a corner. Then, in 2018, President Trump pulled the United States out of the deal. He reimposed sanctions and launched what he called a maximum pressure campaign. The goal was to cut Iran's oil exports to zero. And it nearly worked. Iran's oil revenue plummeted. The Rial, which had been trading at around 55,000 to the dollar, began its most dramatic collapse yet. But here's the thing that makes Iran's currency crisis unique. There isn't one exchange rate. There are at least two. The official rate is set by the Central Bank of Iran. It's artificially low, used for essential imports like food and medicine. Then there's the black market rate, which is what actual people use to buy and sell dollars on the street. The gap between these two rates is enormous. When the official rate says one thing and the black market says another, the black market is telling you the truth. Let's look at what happened in just the last 2 years. In December 2024, the black market rate hit 756,000 Rials per dollar. By February 2025, it had blown past 890,000. In March 2025, it crossed 1 million Rials per dollar for the first time in history. And by December 2025, it was trading at 1.2 million Rials per dollar. As of January 2026, reports put the rate at 1.45 to 1.60 million Rials per dollar. To put that in perspective, if you had 1 million Rials in your pocket, you could not buy a single cup of coffee at an American Starbucks. Your entire stack of cash, 1 million units of currency, would be worth less than 70 cents. And this isn't just an abstract number on a chart. This is a humanitarian crisis. Between 27 and 50% of Iranians now live below the poverty line. 57% face malnourishment. Youth unemployment hits 50% in some regions. Inflation has been running above 40% for years. The average Iranian worker has watched their life savings evaporate. A family that had enough to buy an apartment 5 years ago might not be able to afford groceries today. There's another layer to this that most financial coverage misses. Iran actually has 2 names for its money. There's the Rial, which is the official unit, and the Toman, which is what people actually use in daily life. 1 Toman equals 10 Rials. So when someone says a loaf of bread costs 100,000, they might mean 100,000 Rials, or 100,000 Tomans, which is actually 1 million Rials. This dual naming convention creates constant confusion and makes it even harder for ordinary Iranians to track how much purchasing power they're losing. The Iranian government has tried to address the currency crisis multiple times. They've proposed redenomination, essentially knocking zeros off the currency. In 2020, Iran's parliament approved a plan to replace the Rial with the Toman and remove 4 zeros. So instead of 100,000 Rials, you'd have 10 Tomans. But redenomination doesn't fix anything. It's cosmetic surgery on a patient with a systemic disease. If the underlying causes, the sanctions, the money printing, the corruption, the oil dependency, aren't addressed, the new currency will collapse the same way the old one did. So what would it take to actually fix the Rial? The honest answer is that there's no quick solution. Lifting sanctions would help, but that requires a nuclear deal that neither side seems interested in right now. The IMF projects Iran's GDP will grow just 6% in 2025 and maybe 1.1% in 2026. That's not growth. That's barely keeping the lights on. Meanwhile, inflation is projected to stay above 42%. Iran could diversify its economy away from oil, but that takes decades of investment, education, and institutional reform. It could stop printing money to cover its deficits, but that would mean cutting government spending or raising taxes, both politically explosive options for a regime that already faces regular protests. The truth is, the Iranian Rial's collapse isn't just about bad luck or unfair sanctions. It's the result of a system that has been making the same choices for 45 years, prioritizing political ideology over economic stability, using oil revenue as a crutch instead of building a diversified economy, printing money to paper over deficits, and maintaining a dual exchange rate system that enriches insiders while destroying the savings of ordinary people. When Google shows you that 1 Iranian Rial equals $0, it's not rounding down. It's telling you the summary of a 45-year economic tragedy. A currency that once bought something now buys nothing. And for the 88 million people who have no choice but to use it every day, that 0 isn't a number on a screen. It's the price of everything they've lost.